Okay, so we are now recording, hopefully. So thanks to everybody for coming. Night number 2. So last night we learned 3 halachos. We summarized. One is that on a regular Friday, Erev Shabbos, that you are allowed to eat, obviously, but we say you shouldn't eat a bigger meal than normal because there's an idea to be hungry for the Friday night meal on Shabbos. On Erev Pesach specifically, because of the mitzvah of matzah, to eat matzah, so we should not eat from 9 halachic hours into the day. That's 3 hours, more or less, from before sunset, in order that we should be hungry for Pesach. And one last halacha that we learned is that if we had a Sudas mitzvah, a mitzvah meal on Friday before Shabbos, like let's say we had our Purim meal on Friday afternoon, so once Shabbos comes in, we'd have to stop the meal straight away, make Kiddush, and then we could continue, because once Shabbos starts, we're not allowed to make Kiddush. Or once Shabbos starts, we're not allowed to eat until we make Kiddush. Okay, so today we're going to be covering something fascinating, I think, something very relevant, about Kiddush and Shul on Friday night. The age-old question is, why do we have to make Kiddush and Shul if I'm going to make it at home? Or why do I have to make it at home if I already made it in Shul? So the Gemara is going to say that the practice to originally making Kiddush and Shul started in the times of the Gemara, when people would travel around. They wouldn't stay in people's homes. They would stay in the Shul. So what they would do is they would make Kiddush in the Shul for the guests that would stay there. And it seems that takana, that rule that the rabbis made, has stuck around in many shuls, even until today. But let's go ahead and see the argument in the Gemara behind it, and we'll get a little bit better of an idea. So we are starting at the bottom of Daf Kuf Amud Beis, 100b, I have on the screen. Starting from this word, 3 lines from the bottom, last word on the line, Osam. So here we go. It says, Osam b'nei Adam. Osam b'nei Adam. Shekidshu b'beis HaKnesses. These people that decide to make Kiddush in the shuls. Does Young Israel make Kiddush in the shul? I'm not even sure. Before COVID,
yes.
Kiddush in shul?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. So I guess not anymore with COVID. But these people that make Kiddush in shul, says the Gemara, comes down to an argument. So Amar Rav, Yidei Yayin, Lo Yatzau, Yidei Kiddush, Yatsu. So there's 2 things to keep clear. One thing is, there's a mitzvah's aseh. There's a positive mitzvah to make Kiddush Friday night. That's one. Number 2 is that if you make a Borei Pri Hagafen on that wine, do you need another Borei Pri Hagafen when you go home? So according to Rav, he says, Yidei Yayin lo yatsu. For your wine, you are not yotze. You did not fulfill your obligation. You go home. You need a new Borei Pri Hagafen. However, Kiddush, Yatsu. Through your Kiddush, you technically are Yotze. You fulfilled the obligation. You would not need to make Kiddush again when you go home, according to Rav. But Shmuel Amar, 1 second, we're just going to do the next page here. Shmuel Amar, maybe we should get a better way to do this so we don't stop in the middle to look into it. So
good to watch everybody. Thank you for coming to learn this evening. Today's daf. Today's daf is Pesachim daf Kuf Aleph. We left off.
Pause on that. Okay. So according to Shmuel, Amar Af Yidei Kiddush Lo Yatsu. Even your Kiddush you did not fulfill. So the question's why. So Rav says that your Kiddush you fulfilled, your wine you did not. Shmuel says even your Kiddush you didn't fulfill. So it's like funny. So why do you bother to make Kiddush and Shul anyway? So explains the Gemara. Rav, according to Rav, Lamale lekidushe bebeise. According to Rav, why do you have to make Kiddush in your house? You already fulfilled Kiddush and Shul. So he answers, Kidei lahotzi banav ubnei beso, in order to help your sons and the people in your home fulfill their mitzvah. The man preferably should be making the kiddush in the home. So you should go home and make it again for the people there. Ushmuel ulamali likidushe bebekanishta. So Shmuel, if he says that you didn't even fulfill your obligation of kiddush and shul, then why do you do it? So he says liafuke orchim yidei chovasan. It's in order to take the people out of their obligation. They're visiting your shul. They're sleeping in the shul. As the Gemara says, fourth line down, De'achlu v'shasu v'ganu b'beikanishta. The people that are eating and they're drinking and they're sleeping in the Beis Knesset, in the shul. So the problem that Shmuel has, the reason why you cannot fulfill Kiddush in shul, why we would not fulfill it if we're not sleeping in the shul, is this problem right here. The Gemara says, Shmuel taimei. Shmuel goes according to his reasoning. He's consistent to Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says, Ein Kiddush ella b'makom suda. He says, this is a big halacha for tonight, that we can only fulfill Kiddush b'makom suda. That means that we need to make Kiddush in the place that we're eating. Mm-hmm. So ideally, we would make Kiddush at our dining room table, and we would wash for Hamotzi, or if it's Shabbos day, we'd have cake, whatever it is, in the place of our Kiddush. But if you make Kiddush in shul, and then you go home to have your meal Friday night, so that's not Kiddush b'makom suda, says Shmuel. If you're making Kiddush in shul, you need to eat in shul. If you're eating at home, you need to make Kiddush at home. This has actually very big applications. Let's say that Shabbos morning, this always happens. Shabbos morning, they're going to have a Kiddush in shul. And you don't want to seem too overeager. You want to be a little more of a mensch. So you say, that's okay. I'll just have a little piece of brownie, cake, whatever it is. But you did not have a kazayas. You did not have a olive-sized piece of mazonos. So that means that you did not fulfill Kiddush you didn't fulfill your Suda, the obligation of your meal, in the place of your Kiddush. Well, then retroactively, it's like backwards, you never fulfilled Kiddush, and then what you're eating is actually usur. You're forbidden from eating that food because you never made Kiddush. So when we say Kiddush b'makom Suda, you need to make Kiddush and eat a kazayas, eat an olive's worth piece right there. And if you don't do that, you did not fulfill Kiddush. Anything you do eat is forbidden from you. So that's a big thing. So Shmuel says that you do not fulfill your mitzvah of Kiddush and shul. But we make Kiddush and shul for the guests, and then you would go home and say it again for the people in your home. So now what the Gemara is going to do is it's going to list a few different rabbis that also agreed that Kiddush b'makom suda. Before that, it's going to say that Kiddush b'makom suda, we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down, 7 lines down. So it says, Hani Mili, these words that we just said about Kiddush b'makom suda, that's only may bias the bias. It's only a problem if you change from one house to another house, or let's say from your shul to your home. But if you're just going from place to place inside of one house, like let's say you want to make Kiddush in your dining room, and then for some strange reason you want to have your meal in your living room. So he says that that's not a problem. You're allowed to do that. We can talk out the specific halacha in just a moment, but let's just get through a little more of the Gemara. So, Amar Lahu Rav Anan bar Tachlifa. So, Rav Anan bar Tachlifa says, Zimnin Segin Havaka Amina Kameda Shmuel. Many a times I ate by Shmuel's house. V'nachis me Igra La'ara. We were eating up in the attic, and we had to go down onto the ground level. Why? V'hadar Makadesh. He went back and he made Kiddush. So it seems that they had like a lamp on in the attic, and the candle flickered out, so it wasn't such a nice place to eat up there. So they had to go downstairs, and they made kiddush again. Seemingly even made makom l'makom, from place to place in the home, in the same home. So the Af Rav Huna Savar, Ein Kiddush El B'makom Suda. We have another example. Rav Huna also holds that Kiddush needs to be B'makom Suda. Why? Rav Huna Kadesh, because Rav Huna, there's an example of him making Kiddush, and then V'is Akar Le'Shraga, and then his candle went out, V'ayli Le, L'mane Lebe Ganani Deraba Brei. And then he went to the wedding house where his son was having Sheva Brachos. It's interesting that he didn't go to where his son was having Sheva Brachos. Okay, but now his candle burnt out, and he has to go to this new place to make Kiddush. To have a Shraga B'Kaddish, because over there, they had a candle, Sheva Brachos, hopefully they'll have a lot of candles, and they made Kiddush there. V'tayim midi. And after they made Kiddush, it says that they tasted something. So Alma, we see Kasavar Ein Kiddush El B'makom Suda. So we see that Rav Huna holds that Kiddush can only be B'makom Suda, in the place of your meal. Another example, we have Rabba Savar. Even Rabba holds Ein Kiddush El B'makom Suda. Why? The Amar Abaye Ki Havina Be'mar, because Abaye was spending time in the house of Mar. Mar is a salutation, a nice, respectful way of saying sir. The Rashbam, I'm just checking, tells us that we're talking about Rabbah. So he was visiting Rabbah, and Kihaba Mekadesh, when he went ahead and made Kiddush, so he had guests over to his home, he made Kiddush for them. They weren't planning on staying. They were planning on going back to their own home. So, you just want to hang out with your friends a little bit more. So they went over to his friend's house, or to the rabbi's house, and they heard his Kiddush. So the rabbi says, why don't you taste something? Amarlan, te'imo midi. You should taste something. Dilma ada izlisu leush pizza, because maybe you're going to arrive back at your home. Mis akr lechu shraga, and your candle has gone out. Velo makdish, and you're not going to be able to make Kiddush. So, lechu b'beis achila, and so now the Kiddush that we're making over here, lo nafkisu, you did not fulfill your obligation by my Kiddush when you came to hang out at my house. The Ein Kiddush ela b'makom suda, because Kiddush only works in the place of the meal. So we have time after time after time. The Gemara says the same thing. Ein Kiddush ela b'makom suda. So now it's a little bit funny. The Gemara is going to ask a question. So it says, Aini, is that true? Kiddush is only in the place of a meal, like what Shmuel's saying. Well, Vaha Amar Abaye, quoting a Gemara from Shabbos and also Menachos, Abaye says, Kol mili demar have avid kirav. Whenever we have a machlokis in Shas, an argument anywhere in the Talmud between Rav and Shmuel, so we know that Rabbah is always going to go according to Rav. So if he holds according to Rav, so Rav, in the beginning of our argument, said that Kiddush does not need to be in place of the meal. And you could fulfill Kiddush in the shul. So why, if he really holds according to Rav, then he should hold that you don't need Kiddush b'makom suda. As Gemara says, V'amar Abaye, Kol mili demar hava avid karav. Rabbah always goes according to Rav, in the machlokas of Rav and Shmuel. Okay, lebar mehani tlas, the avid k'Shmuel. Except for these three cases, Rabbah holds like Shmuel. What are these three cases? One is matirin mi beged lebeged. One is that we're allowed to untie tzitzis from one beged, from one piece of clothing, you can put it on another piece of clothing. This we would think originally should be a problem because we're supposed to treat tzitzis with respect. It's not like you can just sort of take them off of clothes and do whatever. No, they're set aside for a mitzvah. So you can't take them off. According to Shmuel, he says that you are allowed to do it as long as you put it onto another beged. And so Rabbah agrees with Shmuel in that case, number one. Case number two, a little bit funny, we don't do this. Umadlikin mener lener. On Hanukkah, you're actually allowed to take one light that you already lit and light another light on your menorah. That's strange. We don't do that. We use a shamish. The Shulchan Aruch says that you're allowed to do it, but the Ramah says that we're stringent to have a shamish. That's how we light the candles. So that's the second case of Shmuel that Rabbah agrees. The third case is B'halacha Rabbi Shimon B'greira, that he agrees to Rabbi Shimon in a case called Greira or Gorer Kisei. So let's say that you have a bench or even a stroller, and you want to walk the stroller across a baseball field on Shabbos. So the problem is that you're going to make lines in the dirt. So that could potentially be an issue on Shabbos. But according to Shmuel, also Rabbi Shimon over here, he says that because it's a davar she'eno miskaven, that it's something I didn't have in mind to do. If, let's say, I really wanted to make lines in the dirt, it would be problematic. But I don't care about making lines in the dirt. I just want to push my stroller across the baseball field. What the heck? It's not such an issue. So they say, well, I didn't have in mind to make lines in the dirt. That's fine. If you know for sure an action will come about, let's say you want to open your refrigerator on Shabbos. Yeah, my intention isn't to turn on the light, but the way fridges are designed is that every time you open up the fridge, the light's going to flip on. So that you cannot do. That's called a psik reisha. That's learned from the Gemara on Shabbos. There's a rabbi, he wants to make a toy for his kid on Shabbos. What's he do? The toys back then, they would take a chicken and chop off the head. And they would give the chicken head to the kids to play with. And so psik reisha literally means chop off the head. So I didn't have in mind to kill the chicken, right? I just wanted to give my kid a toy. No, but we say every time you cut off a chicken head, the chicken's going to die. So you can't do that on Shabbos. It's the same thing when I open up the fridge. I really don't want to turn the light on Shabbos. It's davar she'eno miskaven. I didn't have kavanah for it, but it's going to happen anyway. So that you can't do. But if it's something gorer kisei, I'm dragging a bench or a stroller across the dirt, so maybe I'll make lines, maybe I won't, so that you're allowed to do. And that's what Reb Shimon and Shmuel hold over here. So
is that different than a psik reisha shelo nichale?
Right. So then it gets a little complicated. It's psik reisha delo nichale. So you always have to ask a posek in each situation. Each situation is different. Also, the fridges are very complicated with the different computer systems. You open it up and it starts measuring how much cold air is going in. I'm not even sure. That would be a good question for Rabbi Brander. I think he knows a lot about that. By the way, I hope I mentioned this. We mentioned it 5th and 6th grade all the time whenever we learn halacha. So it's always important to ask a local Orthodox rabbi. I am local and I am Orthodox and I am a rabbi, but I'm not your particular rabbi. I'm somebody giving a shiur in the community, right? Or in school, I'm the kid's rebbe. So I think it's always important to take what we learn, see the sources, and then you know what to ask. It's always good. They say a halacha a day keeps the rabbi away, but sometimes it brings the rabbi closer because now you know all the good questions to ask. And so you're doing things right. So we get a little basis, but then we want to get a little clearer. So to go to a rub. So we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down from the bottom. So it says, Kisei v'safsol b'Shabbos. So that you're allowed to do. Ubilvad shelo yiskaven lasos chritz. As long as you don't have kavana, have intention to make a little line in the dirt. So that's okay. So our question is, Rabbah usually always goes according to Rav, except for 3 cases. He holds like Shmuel, that you're allowed to untie tzitzis to put on another beged, or number 2, that you are allowed to light from ner to ner, candle to candle on your Hanukkah menorah, and 3, you're allowed to drag your stroller through the dirt on Shabbos, as long as you don't have intention for it. So why doesn't he hold like Rav over here that says that you technically should fulfill Kiddush and Shul because you don't need Kiddush at the place of your meal? No, so the Gemara answers, a little bit funny of an answer, Kechumei derav hava oven, kikuli derav lo hava oven. So according to the chumras, according to the stringencies of Rav, so he'll hold. But according to the leniencies of Rav, he does not necessarily always hold like, even in a machlokis, in the argument of Rav and Shmuel. So over here, Rav says that you would fulfill your mitzvah of Kiddush in Shul, even though you're not eating there. He does not say you need Kiddush B'makom Suda. So that would qualify as a leniency. So not necessarily is Rabbah going to agree with him there. So what are we coming out with here? We say that Kiddush needs to be b'makom suda. It needs to be in the place of your meal. Ideally, we would do it at the same table where we're making Kiddush. Basically, always ask a shaila, a question, but the general rule is that you can see the place where you're going to be eating. So I'm sitting here in my dining room. I can see the coffee table out there in the living room. So I technically could eat over there. That's still called Kiddush B'makom Suda. There's an interesting discussion about what of a sukkah. Let's say Sukkot's night, you make Kiddush, and all of a sudden it starts pouring down rain, and you want to go inside. So is that called, I need another Kiddush inside? So a lot of poskim say that if the sukkah is connected to your home, it's just that like you don't have to walk outside. So if you could see your dining room table, then the same thing would apply. You would not need new Kiddush. But there is a lot of argument amongst the poskim. So always make sure to ask that question. But here we're coming out that Kiddush needs to be b'makom suda. It needs to be in the place of your meal. So now that we had that machlokas between Rav and Shmuel, does the Kiddush, do you need a new Kiddush if it wasn't b'makom suda? Well, 3 lines from the bottom it says, Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Rabbi Yochanan says, Afide yayin nami yatsu. You can make a bracha on wine in shul and go home, and you don't even need a new berei pri hagafen. Fascinating. He says, Rabbi Yochanan l'taimei, Rabbi Yochanan goes according to his reasoning. The Amar Rabbi Chanan bar Abaye, Amar Rabbi Padas, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So quoting a bunch of names in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Echad shino yayin, I'll change the page in a minute. Echad shino yayin, ve'echad shino makom, ein sarech levarich. He says that whenever you change a place, or even whenever you change your wine, you do not need a new bracha. So the Rashi and the Rashbam, they both explain that on your new wine, when it says you don't need a new bracha, so there's a halacha of hatova hametiv. Whenever you change wines in the middle of your meal, if you did not have it out on the table before, again, ask a question. This can get a little tricky. So you would need a new bracha hatova hametiv. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hatova hametiv. Basically thanking Hashem that He gave me something good, and He's making things good also. He's bringing me a new bottle of wine. So, but a new berei pri hagafen. So Rabbi Yochanan says, I don't need. Even when I change place. So Rabbi Yochanan, he seems very lenient. You don't need to make Kiddush again when you go home. Kiddush does not need to be b'makom suda. And also when you change physical locale, you do not need a new bracha. We're going to prove him wrong. So the Gemara says, Meisvei. On the top line, Meisvei. Shinoi makom sarich levarich. When you have a change of place, you do need a new bracha. Shinoi yayin, ein sarich levarich. If you have a change of wine, then you do not need a new berei pri hagafen. Again, like we said before, could be you need hatov hametiv, but no new berei pri hagafen. So tiyufta de Rabbi Yochanan, tiyufta. Tiyufta is a very strong question word. It's almost like checkmate for chess players. So we did a checkmate, a tiyufta on Rabbi Yochanan. It seems that whenever you have shinoi makom, when a change of place, then you need a new bracha. So let's go a little further in the Gemara. We can talk out shinoi makom a little more as we go through. So they're going to give a story about some rabbis that were arguing about shinoi makom. So the third line, It says, Yosef Rav Idi bar Avin, Kameda Rav Chisda. So Rav Idi bar Avin was sitting in front of Rav Chisda. Yosef Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda was sitting, Amar Mashmei de Rav Huna. And he was quoting this teaching in the name of Rav Huna. What did he say? Hada Amris, Shinoi Makom, Sarich Levarich. When you tell me that Shinoi Makom, the change of a place, you need a new bracha, Lo Shanu, Elami bias but lebias. That's only when you're changing from house to house. Album makom lemakom, but from one place to another place within the same house. Lo. According to Rav Huna, you do not need a new bracha. So let's say you make a shahakol on your water or even your coffee, and you want to you start in your dining room for breakfast. But coffee is hot, so you want to drink it a while, so you're going to move into your office upstairs. So, according to Rav Huna, he says, "Makom lemakom." If you're in the same house, then it's okay. You don't need a new bracha. Amar le Rav Idi bar Avin, hachi tanina le b'masnisa devei Rav Henek. So he says that they taught in the teaching in the house of Rav Henek. The Amri Le, some say there was actually b'masnisa devei bar Henek, in the son of Henek's house that they taught. Kavaseich, they taught like you. V'elo Rav Huna masnisa kamashmalan. So then, if they already taught this teaching in a brisa, so why does Rav Huna need to go out and teach it again? So it says Rav Huna masnisa lo shmiele. Rav Huna actually never heard that brisa. So that's why Rav Huna thought that it was necessary to teach the same halacha again, that if you're going from makom lemakom, you're going from place to place in the same house, then you do not need a new bracha. Okay? So Vesu, furthermore, we have another story. Yosef Rav Chisda, now Rav Chisda is sitting down, Amar Mashmei de Nafshe, and he's saying in the name of himself, Had Amris Shinei Makom Sarich Levarich. This that we're saying that Shinei Makom, change of place, you need a new bracha. Lo Amrin Ela b'devarim she'ein te'unin bracha. That's only talking about something that does not need a bracha. The acharein b'makoman. Okay, let's back up a second. So there's certain types of foods that you need to go back to the place that you ate them to make the after bracha, to make the bracha achrona. The rule is that if you have bread or if you have anything that you make me'ein shaloshan, whether that's al mechia, al hapeiros, or al gefen, so wine, grape juice, grapes, cereal, that's mizonos, these types of things, or bread, you need to go back to the place that you ate them in order to make the bracha. Other things, you could theoretically, it's always better to do it in the original place, but you could theoretically do it somewhere else, right? So over here, where Rav Huna is teaching us that when we say that you don't need, that you're not allowed to change place for your bracha, so Shinei Makom needs a new bracha, lo amrin ela b'devarim she'ein te'unin bracha achareyad b'makoman. You only need a new bracha if you don't need to go back to the original place to make the after bracha. So let's say an example, let's be a little healthy tonight, an apple. An apple is just an ala eitz. It's not one of the 7 species of Eretz Yisrael, so you don't need to make, or you do not make an ala peiros. You just make borei nefashos. And so because that it's not a chashuv, it's not an important after bracha, you don't need to go back to your original place to make the after bracha. So if that's true, then you do not need to. So then if you change your place on this apple, then you need a new borei priya eitz. Changing place requires new bracha. But let's try bread. But if you're talking about things that you need to go back to say your after bracha, like bread, you should go back to bench. Ein sarich levarich. then you do not need a new hamotzi on your bread. You don't need a new mazonos on your cookie. Why not? My taima, asked the Gemara, what's the reason? L'kivet kama hadar. It's because we already established the place that you are going to go back to. So once you said, I started in my dining room, I'm going to go back to my dining room no matter what, so I don't need a new bracha to continue, because it's almost like we had in mind that from wherever I start in this dining room, I'm going to end back up in this dining room to bench. Whatever happens between there, that's fine. So it doesn't need a new bracha. A lot of people on Purim especially, they like going Suda hopping, meal hopping from meal to meal. They start in their original house, and then they might want to go to different friends' house, eat a little bit. So that would not require a new bracha if you had intention when you started, because you're going to go back to your original place to bench. So we have two different opinions. One is that the problem of shinoi bracha, as we just said, is only when you're not going to go back to your original place to bench. But if it's something like bread that you are going to go back to your original place to bench, then you do not need a new bracha. And the other halacha that we learned about shinoi makom, changing your place, is that it only depends if you bounce from house to house. That's when you need a new bracha. But if you're going from place to place within the same house, then you do not need a new bracha. So Rav Sheshes Amar, echad zeh echad zeh tzarich levarich. He says, let's not get things confusing. This one and this one, you always have to make a new bracha. Doesn't matter what. So we're going to come down to the halacha. We keep working there. The Gemara is going to bring a question. It says, Meisvei. B'nei chabura shahayo mesubin lishtos the akru ragleyan ladseis likris chasan o likris kala. So let's say we started our meal, right? And all of a sudden, this happened to us in Eretz Yisrael a lot. When you live in the city, it doesn't happen so much in the suburbs. You see something outside, like a chasan or kala, bride and groom walking by, and you want to go wish mazel tov to them. So the question is, do you need to bench before you leave or not? So kishe'ein yotzin eina te'unen bracha lemafreya. When you are leaving, you do not need to bench before you go, says the Gemara. Kishe'ein chozrin, when you go back to your meal inside, ein te'unen bracha lechachila. You do not need a new bracha, but only in one case. B'ma'adivam amurim. What's the case we're talking about? Shehenichu sham zakein o chole. It's when some older person or a sick person is not able to leave the table. They're staying there as a guard for you. If there's somebody sitting at the table, it's like the meal is still going. And that's when you don't need a new bracha to go back. But if nobody stayed there, lo zakein, v'lo chole, not an older person and not a sick person, well, kishehein yotzayin, when we all go back, to unin bracha lemafreya. So when we leave, we need a benching before we leave. Kishehein chozrin, and when we come back, to unin bracha lechachila. We need a new bracha in the beginning as well. Midikatani, from the fact that we taught earlier, it used the lashon, it used the language of akru raglehen. We uprooted, to be oker is to uproot, so we uprooted our legs. Well, mechlal, that implies to be devarim hateunin bracha la'acharehen b'makom anaskinan. It means that we were only talking about things that require us to return to our place. So, from the fact that we uprooted ourselves from our bread meals, the Gemara is talking uproot, is talking only about a bread meal. And that's when I'm allowed to return, when I have to return to bench. I want to continue eating. What's the reason I'm allowed to continue eating? V'taima dehanichu sham zaken achalehu. Just like we said before. If there's a zaken, an elderly person, or a chole, a sick person, who the kishayin yotzin, so when we leave, ein te'unen bracha lemafreya. We do not need a benching. Ukishayin chozrin, when we return, ein te'unen bracha lechachila. When I return, I don't need to make a new beginning bracha. Avalo hanichu sham zachino chola. But if you don't have somebody staying by your meal, well, kishehein yotzein, when we all leave, te'unen bracha lemafreya. We need to bench first. Ukishehein chozrin, when you return, te'unen bracha lechachila. Then we are going to need a new bracha to start eating. So we say, kasha l'riv chista. So what we've just said so far is there's a kasha on Riv Chista. Riv Chista is the one that taught us that it depends whether or not you're eating bread or another type of meal or another type of food. Am I going back to my meal? And that's when, am I going back to the place that I ate my meal to make my after bracha? Or is it something that, no, I'm going to make my after bracha wherever else, like let's say a chocolate bar. I'm not required to go back to my place. Well, we're flipping that on its head, and we're saying that, yeah, you're right. You're going to go back to your bread meal, but it only works to continue your meal if there's somebody staying there. If there's not anybody staying there, then this leniency, it doesn't work. There are a lot of practical applications of this. I know in a lot of Jewish communities, they'll have an early mincha, Shabbos afternoon, smack dab in the middle of lunch. So sometimes you want to go so that you don't have to go out later for mincha. So all the men, they'll leave the meal in the middle of the meal. The women will stay and chit-chat. The kids will play. And then the men will come back. And that's okay. You don't have to bench before you leave. You don't need a new bracha when you come back because somebody was there guarding the meal. But if the women wanted to go to mincha also, then that wouldn't work. So let's switch the page. A good pausing point. Any questions so far?
I have a question.
Yeah?
The purpose of Kiddush is there's an obligation to sanctify the day.
Sure.
So theoretically, once I've done that and I've had a little meal, it shouldn't matter that I've gotten up and moved anywhere because I've already discharged that obligation.
Well, we say that you need it in the place of your meal. If you didn't do it in the place of your meal, then you didn't fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush. You're right. The Torah says, Zachar is Yom HaShabbos l'kadsho. So you have to remember Shabbos, keep it holy. That's what the Torah says. But now that the Rabbanan say that we need a meal, so unless you do it, this is coming from a Tosfos and Sukkah, unless you do it the way Chachamim wanted you to do it, so you did not fulfill the mitzvah. It could be maybe you did fulfill the Torah obligation of Zachar Yom HaShabbos l'kadsho, to remember Shabbos and keep it holy. But to fulfill the rabbinic obligation, the Rabbanan say that the only way that you can fulfill at least the rabbinic obligation of Kiddush, is to do it in the place of your meal. Tosfos and Sukkah says a bit stronger. That he says that the Rabbanan have the power to rip away your Del Raisa. Until you do it the way the rabbis want you to do it, you didn't even fulfill the Torah mitzvah. Because the Torah says to listen to the rabbis. Oh, you didn't listen to the rabbis? You didn't fulfill the Torah mitzvah. But at the very least, we can say that your rabbinic mitzvah you didn't fulfill until you do it in b'makom suda, at the place of your meal, like the rabbis wanted. Good? Yeah. Okay. So we're getting there. We've covered the main parts. The rest should be fairly repetitive. So it says, just ending on the last line of the Kuf Aleph Amud Bet. So Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said, top of Kuf Beis now on our screen, Mantana Akiros. Who's the one that teaches Akiros, meaning the uprooting from the meal? As we spoke about before, that it sounds like a bread meal if you uproot yourself from it. So, well, Reb Yehuda. That's Reb Yehuda. How do we know that? Tanya, he teaches the same halacha that we learned before, but just a little bit different. It says, Chaverim shahayu mesuben. So friends that were sitting together, v'akru ragleihem, leilech lebeis haKnesses, or lebeis haMedrash. And they lifted their legs up to go to the shul or to Beis Medrash to learn. Kishahain yotzayin, when they left, ein te'unan bracha lemafreya. They do not need to bench. Okashein chozrin, when they return, ain't unan bracha lechachila. They don't need a new bracha to start. So, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, b'madavar mamurim. Rabbi Yehuda says, what are we talking about? That's bizman shahanichu sham mixes chaverim. As you said before, that's when some people are still around there, playing guard on the meal. Aval lo hanichu sham mixes chaverim. But if there's not some of our friends that are staying by the meal, kishahin yotzayin, when they leave, to unan bracha l'mafreya, they're going to need a new. They're going to need to bench. Ukashein chozrin, when they return, they need a new bracha lechachila. They need a new beginning bracha before they can eat as well. Ella, taima devarim hateunin bracha la'acharein be'mekoman. Rather, what we said before, the whole reasoning behind things that you need to return back to your place to bench, to kashein yotzein, that when we leave, ain't unan bracha l'mafreya, so we do not need a bracha, i.e. to bench. Ukshein chozrin, ain't unan bracha l'chachila, and when we return, that we need a new benching, and then the whole fact of al devarim she'enan unan bracha la'achareyan b'mekoman, the things that do not require us to go back to our place to bench, then we say, so why exactly, if we made the split before and we said depending on what type of food we're eating, is it bread that we have to go back to our meal, or is it we have to go back to where we ate the meal to make the after bracha, or we're talking about a chocolate bar where you don't? So then what relevance does this halacha about people staying guard at your table have to do? So it says no, afilu l'Rabbanan, even according to the Rabbanan, kishehein yodsayin, the Rabbanan say that when you leave, and they say it depends on bread or chocolate bar, so to unad bracha l'mafreya, they say that we do need a benching, ukshen chozrin, to unad bracha l'chachila, and when you return, you do need a new beginning bracha. So the Rabbanan agree. The Rabbanan do say that I only return to my table for bread, but I'm only allowed to return and keep eating according to the Rabbanan if we have that guard. So if we don't have the guard, then it's no good. The Gemara says, so we should say that it is a tiyufta. It's the first line where I just scrolled up. So we should say that it's a, thanks Dan. So we should say that it's a challenge, or checkmate again, on Rabbi Yochanan. So we know, because we're doing this daf yomi, a daf and a half at a time, but if we only did a daf at a time, maybe we'd forget. So it says, didn't we already bring a challenge or even a tiyufta on him one time before? On Kuf Aleph Amud Beis, just one Amud ago, we brought a challenge on Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan was the one that taught us that wine, when you change a place, when you make Kiddush and Shul and you go home, that you do not need to make a new bracha. And then we brought a brisa, a teaching that said he was wrong. So now we're bringing another question on him again? That's yesterday's post. I thought we already slugged him up. So the Gemara says, Nema mehanami tiavitziyofta. Okay, not so bad. They said we'll say that there's another question from him here as well. And just now we have two questions against him. So Amar L'cha, Rabbi Yochanan, no, it's not so bad. Rabbi Yochanan would say to you, Hu adin, it's the same thing. Di'afilu devarim she'ein te'unad bracha la'acharein b'mekoma nami ein strichen levarich. For even the things that you do not need to go back to your meal, like that chocolate bar, to make your after bracha, still you do not need a new bracha to begin eating. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you can go all day. And shinei makom, your change of place does not matter. Bahadi katani, akru ragleyan. And so what you taught me before about uprooting ourselves from the meal. So we're making a difference between the bread meal and the not bread meal. Well, that's only lahodicha kocha de Rabbi Yehuda. That's only to tell us the power of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda taught us that we need somebody sticking around at our bread meal in order so that we can come back and continue eating. So the fact that it said akru raglayen, uprooting their legs to go to shul, so that's only to teach us about Rabbi Huda. For that he needs things that have a bracha achrona in their place, i.e. bread. What's the reason that you're allowed to continue eating your bread meal? Time at the hanichu mixes chaverim. The reason is only because some of our friends stuck around. Avaloh hanichu mixes chaverim. But if not any of our friends stuck around, we all decided to go to shul. We're extra religious today. So kishe'ein yotzin te'unin bracha mafreya. When we leave, then we need to bench before we go. Gets a little tricky if you want to make that mincha. Ukshein chozrin, and when we return back to our meal that we ended, te'unin bracha l'chachila. You need a new bracha as well. So Tani Kavasei Rav Chisda, we're going to teach a brisa according to Rav Chisda. It says, who told us that we need a bracha specifically in our place on certain things. So he says, Chaverim shahayu mesubin lishtos yayin. Friends that were gathering together to drink wine. Doesn't happen so often. We just sit down to drink wine. But I guess we're only a few days after Purim, right? V'achru raglayen, and now they uplifted themselves from the meal. V'chazru, and they returned. Ein tzrichen levarich. He says they do not need to make a new bracha. And we're, I guess, assuming that according to the Rabbanan would say that we would need a guard on the table. So that's as much as we're going to go on the Gemara tonight. Let's just do a quick sum up of what we did, and then we'll call it a night. So we had a machlokus, we had an argument. It comes out that we do need kiddush b'makom suda. We need to make kiddush in the place of our meal. So what about kiddush and shul? So originally we made it for the guests that were in the shul. Now why do we make it? That's a very good question. So the Shulchan Aruch says that in Eretz Yisrael they don't do it. I didn't see a shul in Eretz Yisrael yet that did do it. It seems the yeshivas in America also don't make kiddush and shul Friday night, but a lot of the shuls, I guess, including Young Israel, do. So once they made the rule to, or the practice to make kiddush and shul, so we continue making kiddush and shul. That's the idea. But because that we need to be careful of kiddush b'makom suda, having kiddush where our meal is, so we give it to kids. Hey, Cole. So if Cole's there at the meal, if Cole goes Friday night to shul, could we give him the wine? Well, that's also up to debate. That's also not so simple. Because let's say Cole's above the age of 6 or 7, so maybe we need to make him, because of chinuch, educational purposes, he also needs to practice kiddush b'makom suda. But then, if you want to give it to somebody less than 6 or 7, then you don't have to make a brei priya gofen for him anyway. So either way you go, it's like a mimayin of shach. Either way is that you're going to be making some bracha that you don't need. So I think that's why a lot of yeshivas don't do it. The shuls, it's a nice thing to do with families around. So according to every rav, they're going to decide the question, how it's done. If there's not any kids around, the best thing to do is for the adult to just drink a revius, somewhere between 3 and 4 ounces, and that could count as their meal. Also, people that are gluten-free, they're not going to have bread or mazonos, that they could fulfill kiddush b'makom suda by drinking a revius, 3 to 4 ounces of wine, or grape juice, by drinking a revius of wine or grape juice. So that's what an adult should theoretically do if they make kiddush and shul Friday night. Then we talked about this concept of shinoi makom. The basic concept is that when we change places, we go from one house to another house, so we are going to need a new bracha. The famous question is, especially in college or in yeshiva, if in the city, if you live in the same apartment building and you want to bring your cup of coffee over to your friend's house, the next apartment, you're right. I didn't leave the building. I'm in the same building. I'm going. Technically, it's not my bias. The bias is not from house to house. It's just makom l'makom, from one place to one place in the same building, the same physical structure. So a lot of poskim say that different houses inside the same building constitute a new house. and would require a different bracha, even though it's in the same physical structure. If you're in a different place in the same house, better to have in mind at the time of your bracha that, yeah, you're right, I'm eating breakfast right now, but I want to take my cup of coffee upstairs to my office to work. Better to have in mind at the time of your bracha. If not, so there are opinions that say you do not need a new bracha for the coffee. Another famous question, you take the coffee into your car and you go to Starbucks on the way to work and you're going to be drinking coffee on the way. You're changing place every single second. That should, hopefully, unless you're stuck in really bad traffic or something. So is that considered shinei makom? So your car counts as one physical domain. Even if you're on a road trip and you're traveling hundreds of miles, but if you didn't leave the passenger seat or the driver's seat, so that the area where people are sitting inside the car counts as one makom. So that would not need a new bracha, even though you made the bracha in Connecticut and now you're in Florida. How that happened without going to the bathroom, I don't know, but you would not need a new bracha. And then the last interesting halacha that we learned is that you have a bread meal and you want to continue your meal by going to mincha or something like that. So you would need a guard at the table. If there's not a guard at the table, then ideally a person would bench. And then if they wanted to eat more when they came back, then they would need a new beginning bracha. We view it as a new meal. Questions? Okay, so that's it for tonight. Thank you for everybody for coming. I'm making notes every night of the different halachos that we collect over the week, and I'm going to be sending it out in a sheet just so that we really have a takeaway. That a lot of Gemara, it's supposed to be learned halacha l'maisa, but a lot of halachos that we learn aren't so practical to our lives. What's great about this parak in Shas is that most of the halachos are that every single night we have a takeaway. Baruch Hashem. So we try and keep track of that. Okay, so thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Tomorrow night, same bad time, same bad place for those that are available, and we should be putting it onto YouTube on the same channel as last night. If you want to go looking for it or spread to your friends.
Excellent.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Good night.